Let me lick it. Lick it. Let me lick your pretty piggy cunt. Jason is my son, and today is his
You could have dinner with us. My brother makes good head cheese. Candyman, I get cheese. Candyman, Candyman. We all go a little mad sometimes.
Welcome to the final podcast, the last podcast you will ever listen to. We are the creators of the Spooky Pit, the innovators of the Passion Bump, and we are bringing you down the darkest rabbit hole of all things horror.
We review horror movies, then fuck 'em with comedy. We are your final bros, Bryan Hotboy LaGrasta and Shane Mel Gibson stunt double Smith. And we're joined as always by our Scream Queen, Jen, the producer.
And this is a special recording because we're having deja vu doing this, but not for you.
You can say that again.
Yeah,
We're having deja vu doing this.
Hey.
I like that. For all, those of you listening, obviously we're coming off Cult Month, Cultathon, whatever you want to call it, and we're entering our first annual Christmas specials. And this is the second time we're recording Black Christmas 74.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a mishap, but we love the movie so much, we're still doing it.
Yeah, this is a movie we don't too much mind recording again. We enjoyed it. But if we had to redo this for like The Sect or something, I probably would have left.
Or like any of the other cult movies that just made your asshole pucker.
I feel like you would enjoy Midsummer though. Like you just were like, well, I guess we got to start over. Let's rewatch it.
Oh, this sucks. We have to watch this again.
Yeah,
Oh boy, what a bummer.
I definitely don't want to watch the only 10 we've given out again.
But something I don't think I mentioned last time, this film was actually like on the script, it was called Stop Me instead of Black Christmas. And it was Clark's idea to call it Black Christmas.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the script name when it was written was Stop Me, which I think Black Christmas has such a better ring to it because Clark really just liked the idea of the irony of something dark like this happening on Christmas.
Yeah, though that's what I'm understanding. I wonder why Stop Me was even considered a title. I don't understand how that would even apply.
Well, Billy talks to himself like the whole movie. Like you think this person has like multiple personalities or any of that. So maybe he would start to yell in like a different voice, Stop Me or something.
Maybe, but I will say like the voice of Billy in this movie is so creepy. Kind of like has this like split personality, captures all the voices of his family so well. You think there may even be like a little schizophrenia there. I think he does such a good job. If you don't know anything about Black Christmas, this is one of the iconic slasher movies that really kicked off the genre. For this podcast, we've reviewed several higher profile slasher movies. I think the first one we did was High Tension. Then we did I Know What You Did Last Summer. And then we did some of the banger ones like
Friday the 13th, we did Halloween.
So we want to see where like this one measures up with those guys, with some of the big ones. And I'm super excited to do it because not only are we kicking it off with the holiday season, this movie does some things so different than any other slasher movies that I've seen. And I think that the director does such a good job with it. And I can't wait to explore his camera work, his cinematography, and some of these close-up shots he does. They're absolutely brilliant.
So with all that said, let's jump right into the Spooky Pit.
A sorority house is tormented by a stranger during the Christmas season. This movie was released in 1974, directed by Bob Clark. It's a horror mystery, and it stars Olivia Hussey as Jess, Keir Dullea as Peter, Margot Kidder as Barb, John Saxon as Lieutenant Ken Fuller, Marianne Waldman as Mrs. Mack, Andrea Martin as Phil, James Edmund as Mr. Harrison. And just a quick call out, because you know this movie was remade a few times. Andrea Martin, the lady who plays Phil, is Mrs. Mack in the 06 version.
Interesting.
She actually does still have the curly hair like she does in this movie. Not sure if she has the glasses. I don't remember, but
I don't think so, but maybe we'll review the 06 one. Who knows?
one day.
Do you guys remember, I forget which actress it was, she only took the role because a psychic told her to?
Yeah, it was the main character, right? Olivia
Yeah.
Hussey. She has a Golden Globe for Romeo and Juliet. I think
Yeah.
it was 6 years before this movie was made, because I think the movie was made in 68. She's got some accolades. Also, I just want to say she has like a really funky accent in this movie.
Oh, we'll get to that.
We're gonna definitely get into that. I didn't get it. I'm like, whatever. But I would say this movie definitely pioneered the slasher genre for sure. I mean, this
Last House on the Left.
yeah, that
Oh,
one
yeah.
too. That was in the 60s, right?
Yeah, that was 68, I believe.
This came out in 74 along with Texas Chainsaw. They came out the same year. And I always like refer to Texas Chainsaw as like the go-to slasher movie. I think we've done it throughout this whole podcast.
Yeah, we will eventually review it
Can't wait.
because we basically have on almost every other episode we talk about.
It's because the movie does everything so well And it's not even a bloody movie, but it just does everything so well and it really captures terror.
Yeah.
I love it.
No, it's perfect. But
So-
this movie is also pretty close to that.
Yeah.
So I know we'll get into like the whole zeitgeist and what was going on in like real life, like during this movie. But this Black Christmas was allegedly, in quotes, since you can't see me because this is a podcast, inspired by some real life murders that occurred in Montreal, Quebec, in Canada, based on Canadian serial killer Wayne Boden, who killed 3 women in Montreal between October 1969 and January 1970. And his 4th known victim was murdered in Calgary, Alberta, in May of 1971. And he was known as the vampire rapist.
No.
Okay.
A very interesting reaction to that.
The vampire rapist?
Yeah, probably gonna take a guess that it was the way that he like drained their blood. Maybe he cut their heads off or something. I'd have to really look in. I actually don't know too much about this particular murderer, so don't get mad at me that I'm not saying all these facts about him. But based off his name, he probably drained them of their blood or some sort.
That's sick. They're sick, but they're interesting, if you know what I'm saying.
So we'll talk more about like what's going on in like the timeline of when this movie came out, but I'm excited to get into this movie.
I love Christmas. I love Black Christmas.
And you love establishing shots of sorority houses that are completely lit up with Christmas lights while Silent Night is playing.
And Silent Night is one of my all-time favorite songs. Not just holiday songs, just an all-time favorite song. It is absolutely beautiful. I do love when it plays, because it only plays during Christmas time. But yeah, you're introduced to a POV shot, which is not foreign in this movie. I would say this is the shot the director really sunk his teeth into when making this, because this is the movie. The killer's basically, you see everything through his point of view, right? And he's walking up to the house, because you just see the house, and he looks up at the upstairs window. Inside a nearby window, they're having like a party. One of the characters that's inside, Barb, she notices that the front door is open and she goes to close it. Assumption here is that the guy outside has already tried to open the door, but you don't really see that.
So what the guy then decides to do, which I don't know why these things exist, because it's there for the purpose of climbing in to sneak into someone's window.
Yeah, when I see something like this, I'm automatically assuming the sole purpose of this is for intruders to come into your home.
Yes.
You are inviting them in.
Because it's literally just this like gate that leads from the floor to a window. I guess like vines are supposed to grow through it.
I don't understand why they don't have like a neon sign that just says "Rob me blind."
So yeah, though, that's what he does. He uses that to get into the house. We get a look of inside the party again and people talking. There's this girl, Barb. She's talking. And then the phone rings. And that is when you get your first hello of the movie. And that is our main character, Jess, answering the phone, who only has a strong accent when she answers the phone.
Olivia Hussey, I checked the actress. I think she was born in Argentina. I don't know if she has trouble doing English accent, or this is just her just saying the word weird. Like, I have no idea, but she says it consistently throughout the film. It's not like a one-off.
She's just going, hello. The POV character we see now sneak into the attic, and then Barb gets on the phone, and it's Barb's mom, and that's it. It's not that important.
No, it's not. And I just want to point out that this character, Jess, it appears that she's wearing a Manos Hands of Fate shirt. No, I cannot confirm that, but it looks like the logo with the guy's hands. If anybody's seen that movie, it's great.
Perfect 10 out of 10. I know it's crazy saying that coming off Midsummer, saying 10 out of 10, but Manos Hands of Fate is maybe a better 10 out of 10.
I would say so. I think it's in the IMDb top 250, probably top 10.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
So like Shane mentioned, the guy's upstairs. He's in the attic. There's a lot of storage there. He's actually coming down from the attic. The phone rings again. You do get another hello. It's Jess, right?
Yes.
This is the point where Jess is like, hey guys, it's the moaner again. So then all the girls kind of crowd around the phone and you listen to these weird screaming noises come from this man. And the guy's like, let me lick it. Let me lick it. Let me lick your pretty little cunt. And he's like, suck my juicy cock. You think I'm embellishing, but I'm not.
No, that's exactly what he says. And I think you're starting to creep out, Jen, with how accurate you are at doing that voice.
It just sounds like a weird Mrs. Doubtfire.
I'll be honest with you guys. I'm a time traveler.
So you were the actor in the 1974 Black Christmas?
Correct.
Impressive.
So Barb takes the phone, and Barb is the edgy one of the group. And she's going to tell this perv to stick his tongue in a socket. And you know what he's going to tell her to do? Stick his tongue in her pretty pussy. Then in a normal voice, and this is super creepy just to start the movie, he's like, I'm going to kill you. And then hangs up the phone. So imagine like him talking like all this gibberish, and then he just drops that on her.
It's very creepy. An unsettling start to like what you know is going to be the killer of this movie. And you know nothing about him other than that. And it's terrifying.
And I might as well like mention right now, because he's going to be obviously reoccurring these calls. There were actually like 3 different people on the cast. I believe they were crew, but they were recorded upside down. Like they put the people upside down because it really distorts your voice.
Yeah, like the noises are real guttural. There's screams, there's laughs. You actually hear you hear women's voices, men's voices. I mentioned like this character, it's a man. You could tell it's obvious because when he's climbing up, it's not like I'm fooling anybody. When he's climbing up to the attic, you see the hair on his arm.
Yeah,
it's
a dude.
So you're thinking, okay, multiple personalities, schizophrenia, something like that. But he's encompassing a bunch of different voices. He throws out a bunch of different names, and you're going to learn his backstory only through these phone calls.
Correct. But before we learn backstory, Claire is now telling the group how a townie was raped last week, and it's not a good idea to taunt this guy on the phone. And then Claire and Barb get into this argument because Barb says it's impossible to rape a townie.
Yeah, I don't know if she means like if they're tough or they're like, sometimes you're like, yo, we're Texas tough. I don't know, wherever they are. They're like, oh, we're tough around here. You don't fuck with us.
I wasn't actually sure what she meant by that. Like, you could definitely be right. But I also think in like the cultural zeitgeist, like, I don't know what they mean by townie. Do you guys know what they mean by townie?
I think since it's a college town that the students are like coming in from outside, like the townies are the people who actually grew up and lived here. That's what I keep laughing while saying this because I'm laughing at the Texas tough thing. But I think that in a way is what they mean is like wherever they are, townies are like these people that like, you don't mess around with the townies. They like kind of fend for themselves. And the college students would be the vulnerable ones.
I wasn't sure if that's what they meant by it or they were being a little more mean and saying like, oh, they're asking for it. You can't rape a townie. Like something like that. I wasn't sure which way to take it.
I guess, yeah, it could go either way.
Because in the cultural zeitgeist, like they filmed this like in the early 70s because this came out like
74.
Okay, so 60s to 70s. I'm not really sure when they filmed this. Kind of like the cultural thing. Like you were like shamed for that.
I always thought 74 was the year that I should have been born. Let's move on. Claire's going to go walk away. She's going to go pack inside her bedroom. Now you're introduced to probably Jen's favorite character, Mrs. Mack, who arrives with a bunch of gifts for the girls.
Oh my God, she's like a patron saint.
Yeah, so like I always refer to cool dudes as bros. Like this one is, what would you consider like a...
She's a bro.
She's a house mom. Like she is large and in charge.
Yeah, she is a bro.
She is. Like, she's just a bro.
She's amazing.
She is. She also is the best at hiding things.
Yeah, that's true. So Claire's upstairs right now and she's playing with her pussy.
This isn't high tension. He means her cat.
Yeah, she found Mrs. Mack's cat, which goes around the house, but he's been missing for like a while.
Yes, this cat's name is Claude, and some would say is the second killer of this movie. Claude kind of like goes away into the closet. Claire's kind of like calling for the cat. It's like, Claude, Claude. She sees something rustle in the closet. She goes towards it and she says, who's there?
She literally says it a ton of times though. She's like, who is that? Who is that?
Because there's someone literally in the closet. Like she can, it's not like, oh, she thinks someone might be there. Like she can see the outline of the person.
Yeah, which is why I'm saying Claude's the second killer because Claude always leads people to danger.
It's weird though, because she goes in the closet the first time. She takes her clothes, right, to pack. She doesn't notice the guy, but he's standing there behind the bags. He's obstructed because you never really see the killer's face. The whole idea is like they want to keep this guy a complete and total mystery. And I love that. It's just like, oh, who's the killer? Who's taking us out? And this might be one of the origin movies of like, oh, the killer's in the house. Like you have the screams, the when a stranger calls kind of deals.
Brian's right. The killer's in the house because now the killer jumps out at Claire, puts a plastic bag around her head and suffocates her.
Yeah, she's bagged up because this guy's worked at a grocery store. So Claire's screaming, right? And at the same time, nobody hears it downstairs because the girls are playing a game. They're opening their gifts, right? The killer now takes the body. And all I think that's shown, Shane, right, is that the attic door closes. You actually don't see like the dragging up there. You just see the attic door.
You kind of just see the shadow of the guy kind of like on the wall upstairs and the door close.
Some would say this is not even a real person. It's just a shadow.
So then we cut to Mrs. Mack and she is opening a book. And in this book is a perfectly cut hole for a bottle of alcohol.
A nice bottle of sherry. And this is not the first time because this woman has hidden bottles and booze all over the house in various different spots.
We will be going into detail on each one.
Oh, she's my hero. She's amazing. Like she goes to such lengths and effort. Like it takes so much effort to carve pages out of a book. And she has managed to carve them in the shape of a bottle.
It's almost like a perfect cutout too.
No, it is. She took the time to carve the perfect sized hole for this bottle.
It reminds me of Shane of that one time where you cut me out and then you cut me in. Jess says, hello? again because now she's getting a call from her boyfriend, Peter.
Yes.
Hello? Hello? Peter tells her that he's been practicing for 4 days straight. He has not slept. She tells him she has something very important to tell him in person and wants him to meet her at 2 o'clock tomorrow in room 30.
Then Mrs. Mack goes upstairs and she opens the top of the toilet.
Yeah.
And she takes out her next hidden alcohol and she proceeds to brush her teeth with it.
Oh, yeah. You never just like grab the string out of the top of the toilet, pull out a bottle of booze, and then just drink it and wash your teeth with it?
No, can't say I've done that, but Mrs. Mack does, and
She is a hero amongst men.
She definitely is a rock star, that's for sure.
Jess goes upstairs to look for Claire because they haven't seen her, but Claire doesn't answer. And this is because we then get a shot of Claire dead in the attic with the plastic bag still around her head in a rocking chair staring out of the attic window.
Yeah, it's a big sorority house. It's a very large house. So on the outside, you can't see anything. Like if you're looking at it from the outside, it's too high up there. But like from certain angles, you can see it, especially when the camera will zoom out of the house. You can see it. But like if you're out there standing, you're not going to be able to see that there's someone up there.
Yeah, like I said the first time we recorded this, it's filmed perfectly and the house is designed perfectly where if you're just a guest walking to the house, you would never look up there at the attic window. It's like would never be in your line of sight. So now we cut to the next day and there's just this man, you don't know who he is, and he's kind of pacing back and forth.
He's a pacer, is what we call in the pacing game. His name is Mr. Harrison.
I thought it was Domantas Sabonis.
I'm dead.
Mr. Harrison, I don't know his first name. I think it's Edmund, but I could be wrong.
We'll just call him Mr. Harrison.
Yes, we will. He gets pegged in the face by a snowball because of those damn kids. Those fucking kids. Brats, sorry. A little Rise of the Scarecrows came out of me. If you haven't seen that review, please check our review of Rise of the Scarecrows and watch that movie on Tubi. It is fucking incredible. He gets pegged in the head with a snowball, drops his glasses on the floor, but a nice young gentleman helps him find them and directs him to where the sorority house is because he's looking for his daughter Claire, and that's where she is.
Yes, this is Claire's father. So the father then goes to the sorority house and he starts to talk to Mrs. Mack. One of the funny scenes of the movie where like he's very disturbed by the pictures and stuff that are on the walls. So Mrs. Mack, what exactly is she like putting her hand over to? Is it like just nude women?
Yeah, I thought it was a woman on top of a woman. It's like a hippie poster or something. She's just trying to cover the butt. And she's like, don't look. This is not your daughter's room.
She could have done a better job in all honesty.
Of hiding that?
Yes.
Oh yeah, because she's not even like leaning. She just has her.
No, but she actually does like leave and then he looks right at it.
Yeah.
But in any case, he doesn't like the atmosphere of this place. They make a reference to like Claire being a goody two shoes in the beginning of the movie, or like not a goody two shoes, but like a good girl. And I know because Barb is kind of like this drunk and she kind of like rips her for it. But this is like probably like one of those Christian guys who's like, I want my daughter to go to a nice school, date a nice guy. And he's seeing his daughter like date just like on the picture, like this guy like named Nick. Or is it Chris? This guy Chris.
Because he sees this picture and he asks Mrs. Mack, like, who is this? And she's like, oh, that's just a boy. It's Chris. He goes to the school.
He's like, so where is my daughter? And I know Mrs. Mack's like, well, she's probably at a party in the common room. We haven't seen her, but I'm sure that she's there.
So Mrs. Mack then leaves to go put on some lipstick as Mr. Harrison heads downstairs. And that's when she hears Claude the cat. She goes to look for Claude without finishing her makeup, drops all of the items from her purse. And she's still calling for Claude as she's trying to pick these items up. So Mr. Harrison then comes upstairs and just sees this like mess of a woman, stuff everywhere, half the lipstick's going. I think there's a bottle of booze on the floor.
She's cursing like crazy, and he just looks at her and he's like, wow, am I really going to take this woman with me to go to the, because I think she wants to go to the store, right? And he's got to go to the sorority house, but they're going to go together.
Oh, she's so funny. Every time like he walks away, she like gives him like middle fingers, like fuck you.
Yeah. There's a cool shot of them getting into the car, and then there's like a zoom in from this point up to the attic where you still see Claire dead in the chair, and you see the kind of like the killer looking out.
It's very cool. Now we cut to Jess and her boyfriend, Peter, and Jess is telling that she is pregnant and she wants to have an abortion.
Yeah, she wants to have a fresh ABO, but he wants to keep the baby. But she says she will not do it. She can't do it. He's like, you're selfish. You don't think about anybody else but yourself. He's like, I think it's time for you to leave. And then she's leaving. And he's like, listen, I do want to talk to you tonight at 9:00. We need to talk.
Yeah. And this is going to be an ongoing story here between Jess and her boyfriend, where Jess doesn't want the baby. She wants to like live out her life without that kind of like burden. And Pete is not having anything of what she is saying.
No, they're going to have this disagreement more than once.
Yes.
Jess actually receives another call. Hello? And after a pause, there's a voice. It's like, Billy. on the phone, the guy's like, what your mother and I must know is where'd you put the baby? And then he just keeps going on. He keeps on rambling with this weird type of dialogue. He's like, what your mother and I must know is Billy. And then just hangs up the phone.
Now that we kind of have his name, it is said that originally it wasn't confirmed that the killer's name was Billy. Like Clark had never pretty much confirmed it. Just in general, it takes like a very Jaws approach to the movie. You never see the killer. You don't get a full picture of who the killer is, which is kind of cool because it makes it a lot more scary. But Billy's erratic phone calls made after like each murder and in between, they were actually very similar to serial killer Paul Michael Stefani, the weepy voice killer. His moniker was developed due to the habit of calling the police after committing crimes. So it's like one of those killers that like wants credit for what he did.
Yeah.
But the director kind of wanted Billy to have a backstory, not like a really concrete backstory, just like you have someone in the film and you want to develop them in a certain way, shape, or form. So he always pictured Billy as Billy had a sister and Billy had two parents. His sister's name was Agnes, which Billy will go back and forth and mention a little throughout this, but it'll say that Billy was abused himself by his parents. He abused his little sister, and Billy had definitely killed his parents and locked his sister in a basement. So it was kind of this abuse cycle the whole time. So that was the backstory that the director gave to Billy after they decided Billy would be the killer, without ever saying that the name was Billy. Of course, he started using it later because everyone calls this killer Billy. And he's like, yeah, this is what the idea of Billy is and how you can kind of form his character in your mind. But the person who like we're going to see just peeking out of things was actually one of the camera guys. And he would have this camera bill attached to like his body that would go over. And so he would be filming the point of view shots of Billy where like, because mostly you just see Billy's eye, which is horrifying.
It is.
Yep.
It's great. But that was all like that cameraman's work of making the camera so you could see his point of view shot while he was playing Billy.
I think it's so cool how they had a cameraman do that because like obviously he knows the best shots to have because he is the cameraman. Like you're getting it from his point of view, so he's walking and it's like the camera's going as he's walking, and just the certain shots they take is like what the killer sees. I think is super cool. I also like the idea of having this like mysterious killer where you have a backstory, but it's very limited and in scope. As the viewer, you're like almost like have to create Billy in your mind, or even if it is, because to be honest with you, that is something that's kind of left up in the air as he's mentioning these names. So you have to draw your own conclusions while watching this movie.
Yeah, because like in this phone call that you just had, it was like Billy's playing almost the role of like the parents, and he's asking himself, where's the baby, which we can assume is Agnes at that point. You have nuances of his family, but because this Billy is going back and forth, you never know like who he actually is, or if he's someone who knew Billy, or if he's Agnes even. Like we just have no idea.
Which we'll get into because there are points of this movie where I do think the killer is someone until later on when it's clearly not like who I thought.
Did you like the hand rub I just gave you?
Yeah, it was weird. It's why I paused mid-sentence.
It was a good embrace.
So after this phone call, Barb, Glasses Girl, and Mr. Harrison go to the police station to report that Claire is missing.
I'd like to say that Glasses Girl is Phil, but Shane will call her Glasses Girl. I can promise you that. He did it the first time we reviewed this.
Her full name is Phyllis.
So yeah, they're talking to the cop, and I'd say he's the best guy on the force.
And this cop is Officer Nash, and he is very smart. And he knows what the word fellatio means.
This cop is what we like to call stupid.
But it was a different time period. It was the 70s. I don't think you even needed an education to be a cop in the 70s.
Clearly not.
Because it's like an ongoing theme I noticed in the older movies. Like Last House on the Left. The cops are morons.
Fucking dumbest cops ever.
And it's like a way they just wrote them. Even though in this one, they do have good cops in this movie because John Saxon's character as Ken Fuller is very good.
It's actually kind of sad though, because these cops, even though that guy's just like an idiot, the cops in this movie are so accurate to how cops were like back then. Because if there was a girl missing, like he even says like to her dad, if it's any console, she's probably with a boyfriend or whatever. And he's like, no, that's not. But that was the excuse that they got. If your kids were a certain age, even like it didn't even matter how old they were. If you were considered an adult though, they were like, well, she can go anywhere on her own accord. But they were mostly considered runaways or hiding out at a friend's house for whatever reason. It's actually like pretty sad that none of the excuses he gives were valid excuses that cops would give back then, because it's a lot of effort. And now we know you have like the first 48 hours are the most important, but they're very accurate. So it's not even just for the movie. Before the fellatio thing comes up, I will preface that they did give letters when they were dialing numbers. So they were prefaced with letters and then some numbers at the end. So that's why he would just like take it and writing down. That doesn't give an excuse why he doesn't know the word fellatio.
As Jen's alluding to, Barb gives him fellatio 2088. And he's like, can you spell that for me? And she does, and he still does not know what this word means or why they're kind of laughing as they're telling him this.
She's like, it's a new exchange. She's like, oh, it's a new exchange. Okay, and he writes it down.
So then we cut to hockey practice. And now I know Brian's a big hockey guy, so he can tell you all about this.
Well, I know, I'm an Anaheim Ducks fan, and I catch them when they're on TV. I also like the movie Mighty Ducks. It's a great movie. Emilio Estevez.
So with all that said, Jess is there, and she's asking Claire's boyfriend, Chris, have you seen Claire? But Chris has absolutely no idea what Claire is.
No, he doesn't. And now he's kind of riled up and scared. So, he's going to go busting down the police station.
Because they basically told them, oh, we're not going to put any missing person signs up. Like, we'll just like see what happens like in another day or so. Like, they're not really going to start searching for it. It's also like nearly Christmas. So I feel like they were kind of slacking anyway. They were like, she's basically an adult. She'll turn up. And when he hears this, that they're not even looking for her, she didn't show up to her dad. No one's seen her. He's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, you have to start searching for her. She's missing, and this is unlike her.
So I have to ask a question. Who here likes pounding shit?
Me?
Yeah, I like to pound, and I like to pound shit. You know who also likes to pound shit? Peter, because he's in the conservatory, and he's just pounding on his piano, getting ready for this recital.
It's almost like it was just his face.
Because he is just hammering away at the piano keys. Or pounding away, as Brian would put it.
And I think actually this is the recital, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the men are like kind of like watching him. They're observing. They don't really give a face. They're like expressionless. And he is sweaty. He's got a lot going on now because now he's thinking about the recital. And he's like, oh, wait, now I have a baby that might potentially get ABO'd. So he's like, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah, it's crazy because he doesn't want the abortion, but he's literally trying to abort the piano keys off of the piano.
I mean, that couldn't be more accurate. Taking his anger out on this piano like it's a punching bag, which is the next scene is what he's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next scene, he literally just takes a music stand and starts massacring the piano. This poor freaking piano, which he does not own. The school probably owns this.
Without a doubt. While this is also happening, though, they are doing like cuts back and forth because we cut back to the police station and you see this new woman. We don't know who she is. I think her name is Mrs. something, but she's looking for her 13-year-old girl, and she is also missing. While she's telling her this, though, Chris bursts into the police station and starts like yelling at Ken Fuller, John Saxon's character, you have to look for Claire. You have to look for Claire.
He has a relationship with Fuller, right? I think he knows his father, so he knows. He tries to calm him down, and he takes him into his office. Flashback to the sorority house at the dinner table. Mr. Harrison has no appetite to eat for obvious reasons. His daughter's missing. Now, Barb is very drunk. She's had a little too many gin and tonics at this point. I actually have no idea. Probably not, because she's not a sailor.
She probably drinks like straight vodka or something.
Yeah.
Or whiskey or scotch, whatever.
True. I mean, if she could find Mrs. Mack's whiskey around the house, she would.
Well, yeah, because Barb is kind of an alcoholic in this movie.
Kind of.
And she has like a thing for going to the zoo.
Yes. So Barb, best character in the movie, now goes into detail to Mr. Harrison of these turtles at the zoo that can have sex for 3 days in a row.
I found out what species of turtle it was.
Oh, what was it?
Sea turtle.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I had extra times. I was like, I'm just going to look this up.
So she also goes into detail of another animal.
Yeah,
Zebra.
Zebra.
And they can go for a long, long time, 30 seconds.
Yeah, and that's why she goes to the zoo. It's just to watch all the different animals have sex.
She's like, I'm lucky if I get half a minute.
She does say that.
Zebra's a little premature ejaculation. You know anything about that, Shane?
The zebras?
No. So Barb, she actually just starts freaking out and she starts yelling at everybody. She's like, I know you all blame me for what happened to Claire. You think it's my fault. And then Phil's like, you're drunk. Go to bed. And she actually does put her to bed, gives her a nice little tuck in.
And we did preface that like in the beginning of the movie when they got like the first phone call that we know of, like her and Claire just don't really get along. And she's been kind of mean. Like everyone says when Claire goes up to pack, why do you have to be so mean to her? You make it hard enough for her.
Because even though I think Claire's part of the sorority, it's your two opposite ends of the spectrum. You have good girl and you have girl that's a little naughty.
I think Barb has been there for like a couple years already, and Claire, this is clearly like her first year or so.
Mm-hmm.
She's the quiet and shy type that like just got introduced to the sorority. So she's kind of not acclimated to, I guess, how they are, because obviously Barb's very loud and likes turtle sex. This is actually when they do cut back to Peter and him smashing the piano.
Yes, he's like, fuck your piano.
Yeah, so he takes the piano stand, as Jen said earlier, and just breaks the entire piano.
And now I don't know if he's like using this as like a frustration, like he's like slamming this down, like almost like on Jess. Do you know what I'm saying?
No,
like,
yeah.
They're really pissed off.
So this is what I was alluding to earlier. This is the first time I'm like, oh, Peter's the killer.
Yeah, I mean, he is like really angry. He just, how much do pianos cost? They're not cheap.
No, not at all.
No,
And that's like school.
maybe $5,000.
And that's school property too. He's smashing most likely. With the phone calls, always talking about like, what'd you do to Agnes or like the baby? And then like, obviously it alludes to like Peter and the baby situation.
Well, like,
it all kind of connects.
Yeah, like they'll even say it later when he, like, we're gonna go have him talk to Jess soon, but he words what she's gonna do to the baby, like, why are you killing the baby?
Yeah.
We're about to see like a very intense encounter between Jess and Peter.
Mm-hmm. So Chris and Jess, they walk in and Chris gets to meet Mr. Harrison. Obviously, Chris is the guy that's dating his daughter and they have not met yet. So they leave the house with Phil, but before Phil leaves, Mrs. Mack tells her that she's going to spend some time at her sister's house for the holidays and she may not be there when they get back.
And this is when she sealed her death.
Yeah. One of the biggest movie sins, which is saying, don't look for me. I'm going somewhere else.
It's true.
Because then you're gone. You're disappearing.
And Phil tells her to go check in on Barb because, like I said, Barb is trash, but she's like laying down in her room.
And now this is when the group, I believe, goes and sees Detective Saxon, who has this huge search party going now.
Detective Saxon, I love it. And I've always wanted to be a part of a search party. I just want to say it. My dream was to be a part of the neighborhood watch because I want to be on the prowl. And Shane knows I'm a guy, I have simple needs, and I like to watch.
It's true.
And I'd love to search.
I guess also true.
So I'd love to be a part of one of these search parties. But they're looking for 13-year-old Janice, who went missing and was last seen around the park they're at now.
But before we continue that search, we got to go back to the house where Mrs. Mack, I believe she's singing, and she's looking for Claude the cat. But little does she know, Claude the cat is in the attic licking dead Claire.
So this is actually really funny because I did also read this cat didn't really want to get on any of the bodies initially. They actually had to cover the actress who played Claire. They sprayed her with like catnip so the cat would get on top of her.
It was trying to avoid getting on top of people.
I don't know. I know some animals are trained to do this now. I don't know what cat they were using. That would be really funny if they were just using like the producer's cat or like someone on set was like, I got a cat. The cat wouldn't do it if they wanted it to. So they were like, well, if you put catnip on her, it'll be on her for a while. We can get plenty of shots. It doesn't say, but I'm curious if they just did that all in one.
I could buy into that. It could be a producer's cat. If you've ever seen the movie A Talking Cat, the director of that movie uses his own cat. And as you're watching that movie, you can actually see the red laser moving on screen to direct the cat where to go.
That cat is very trained, though, because not only did he train him to move like that, he also trained him to talk.
Yes. And it's even crazier because he sounds exactly like Eric Roberts.
Truly remarkable.
I just want to ask that cat, what's your name? It's like Eric Roberts.
That's actually exactly how the cat sounds.
Yeah. No joke.
Watch the movie if you haven't. Okay, but more importantly, back to the good movie we're talking about. Mrs. Mack is now searching for this cat. I believe she starts to hear something in the attic.
I think it's a meowing from the attic.
Yes.
Right?
So sadly, she only makes herself halfway into the attic because once she gets into the attic, she sees dead Claire and she sees a man just holding a giant swinging hook.
Yeah. And the only thing you see of the hand, because it's so dark in there, is his hands on the hook.
Yeah. You don't see a face.
It's
No.
behind her though. Like she doesn't see that automatically. Like he's behind her in the back of the attic with the hook and Claire's in the front looking out the window. So she doesn't see that automatically.
She like sees Claire looking out the window and then she like
turns around,
pans her head like about 90 degrees, sees the man's hands in the hook because you can't see his face. And then I think it's from his point of view, you just see him thrust the hook at her. And this is a please explain to me moment probably.
Yeah.
Because the hook actually does get her and grabs her. So you just say like, how fast can this guy actually throw this hook? And I'm thinking like a Randy Johnson fastball.
And see, I'm glad you brought this up because I have the perfect explanation. So for those of you out there who've seen the movie Ghost Ship, there's a scene in the movie Ghost Ship where there's a bunch of people getting killed. And then the last girl in the red dress there, a hook comes down and it hits her with such force that it lifts her and swings her back and forth. And now this movie also did that same thing where the hook came down with such force, it pulled her up and swung her most likely.
Yeah, but she would have gotten hit with the blunt part of the hook. Like the hook would have had to come from up and he was just holding it and threw it. The hook would have had to come from up to impale her. She would have just gotten blunt force trauma.
The way I'm seeing it is if Ghost Ship did it, it's an accurate thing.
Ghost Ship was like almost 30 years after this movie though.
Yeah, no. But what I'm saying is this movie did it and people questioned it. But then when Ghost Ship did it, people were like, it is plausible now.
Okay.
Because like Ghost Ship's like a 9 out of 10.
So you're saying Ghost Ship, that piece of shit starring Gabriel Byrne, who's a great actor, by the way,
I'd buy it.
makes all of these kinds of blunt force trauma that's actually like a puncture in this film legit.
Yes, that is my point.
Okay.
The whole idea behind making Ghost Ship was so that
They can confirm. Yeah.
could be confirmed.
Yes.
That's the whole point of that movie. Don't fight me on it.
I'm not going to. That movie really doesn't have a point besides that.
Exactly. We're agreeing on this.
So from the attic, you see him like a hook on a pulley. You just see her getting dragged up into the attic. The cab driver's like banging on the door, right?
Yes.
Because Mrs. Mack was supposed to be leaving, obviously packing her bags to go see her sister. There's no answer on the door. He gets back in his car and he drives away. And then I think he starts to rock Claire in the attic, right?
In this part, isn't it when he starts to like go crazy and start like screaming and smashing things in the attic?
Yeah, he rocks her and smashes everything.
I'm confused why he does that. Like, what's he getting upset about?
I just think he's crazy. Or to confirm a theory from earlier, we had just recently seen Pete smashing a piano. Maybe it's
True.
Pete still taking out his anger.
True. This is how, like, in the movie, they kind of show resemblances between Pete and quote unquote Billy.
Exactly. So now we cut back to Brian's favorite thing in the world, search and rescue.
I like to search and I like to watch.
So we are joined by Phyllis, Jess, not Pete.
No, it's Chris and Mr. Harrison.
Yeah, Chris and Mr. Harrison, because even though like this search party is mainly for Janice, they do think that there's a chance like they could find Claire.
They do find a body in this part of the search, and Mr. Harrison is just scared that it's going to be Claire.
Could you imagine this moment though? Like totally, like this is the moment you fear the most in life. That, oh my God, is my baby dead?
Yes.
Yeah. And although it's not Claire, fortunately for Mr. Harrison, even though we know she's dead, it is unfortunately for Janice's mom, who's there sitting in a police car. It is Janice.
And her face is priceless because she's just like goes white, she's like lost.
Yeah, so sadly they have found the 13-year-old girl deceased, but now we cut back to the house as the group is arriving back, and hello? If you don't know what that means Jess has answered the phone again, and of course it is our favorite Billy.
Help me, please help me. Stupid Billy, I know what you did, Billy.
And Jess looks around and she's like looking at this point after this phone call. She's looking for Mrs. Mack. She's like, where the fuck are you, Mrs. Mack? But she can't find her.
Yes, so she looks like she's about to make a phone call when Peter comes from upstairs down to her. And my question is, he explains why he was up there. He says it was cold outside, so he came inside to wait.
Because he was literally, you see a guy earlier like waiting outside the house and it's like, okay, but now he's upstairs.
Yeah.
I think technically he is her college boyfriend, so I don't think it's completely weird that he just enters the house. They don't explicitly say this until like later when the search party visits the house, but I don't think anyone locks their doors.
Well, yeah, that's another thing.
I feel like that's mostly a time period thing in the area that they're in, because it doesn't seem they ever really had something like this happen.
No need to. They also never need to check the attic.
No, I don't even think most people know it's there except Mrs. Mack, and she's dead now.
Yep, poor house mom.
Yeah, she was great. So Jess now calls the police to report the calls that are happening. But the police are like, we're way too busy with the dead 13-year-old. We can't help you.
This guy couldn't be any less help to like Mr. Harrison.
Oh, so this is the point when Peter comes down. Jess has called the cops to say we're getting these harassing phone calls. That's when Peter comes down and surprises her. They put her on hold. And he goes in the other room to wait to talk to her. She's talking to the police station, like you guys said. He's like, oh, yeah, we can't help you. There's a dead 13-year-old, like all that stuff. But Mr. Harrison is already at the police station listening in on this call, just listening to the cop taking the call. And the guy's like, all right, what's your address? And he writes down the address. And Mr. Harrison's like, that's the same address as the sorority house.
Well, before we get to the whole police with the putting one and two together,
yeah,
Jess and Pete have another conversation here.
That's
where, like you said, Jess has just told Pete
1 and 2 together.
I'm going to keep doing it.
I'm dead.
I'm sorry.
I mean, fellatio can't put 1 and 2 together, so we're lucky anyone did.
Exactly. Jess is now talking to Pete. And like Janet said, Jess has just informed Pete about the finding of the dead 13-year-old girl. So Pete thinks this is the perfect opportunity to ask Jess to marry him.
Well, I mean, he's leaving the conservatory. No need to be there anymore. His recital didn't go as planned.
He also completely smashed their piano.
Exactly. And she's like, listen, I can't get married. I haven't done everything. I have ambitions. I haven't done everything I wanted to do yet. There's so much I need to do. He's like, you can still do all those things. We'll just be married in the process.
And you'll have a kid.
Exactly. But she's like, listen, no more excuses. I just don't want to marry you.
Yeah, she basically just flat out rejects him, and he does not take rejection well.
No.
You see it in his face.
Yeah, he's just a very angry person.
Like, he's like, how dare you? Anyone would want to marry me. I can't imagine why you wouldn't. It's like, oh, yeah, you take really good care of your things.
And so then he's like, So how about this baby? Cut back to the police station.
Mr. Harrison brings Nash into the detective's room and is
Yeah.
like, so we reported my daughter missing, and now we're reporting threatening phone calls, and you insist nothing's wrong?
This is the first time that Detective Fuller has known that like these two things have been happening, right? He only knew Claire was missing. He didn't know about the threatening phone calls.
Correct. And now he needs to take a proactive step.
Yeah. And now Detective Fuller is just ripping apart Nash for not taking these prank calls serious, considering they're connected. This is also when another detective who isn't named is laughing in the background.
Literally at the top of his lungs. He's just laughing.
Yeah. So Detective Fuller goes over and he starts like looking at what he's laughing at. And that's when they realize that Nash has written down fellatio 2088.
And then he has to have a talk with Nash about this. And this is a good old fashioned jest. I like the jest. I know you guys like the jest. And Nash is like, it's a number of the sorority house. He's like, fellatio? He's like, yeah, it's a new exchange, FE. And he's like, listen, fellatio, one of the girls came by, they gave it to me. And then the other detective's like bawling on the other desk. He like looks at both detectives, Nash, and he's like, it's something dirty, isn't it? Like, no shit, dude.
You think? So now we cut back to Pete just going off on Jess. He calls her a selfish bitch for killing the baby. He's very adamant that if she doesn't keep this kid, she is going to be very sorry.
He even does like these like vague threats too.
Yeah.
First of all, he starts off this conversation. He's like, well, you're talking about killing this baby, like it's like having a wart removed. And then he says, if you try getting an abortion, and she interrupts him, she's like, get out, Pete. And he's like, if you try getting an abortion, and she's like, leave, you better leave. And then he goes again, he's like, if you try getting this abortion, you're going to be very sorry.
I don't know what their relationship was like prior because we don't see any of it prior to this movie, but he shows such early signs of like being abusive.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, look at his piano.
What's with us and doing movies with these horrible relationships back to back?
Shane is our relationship guru on the podcast. So Shane, I'm going to throw this one over to you. Do you think they have a future here?
No.
That's it?
Yeah.
She's made it so clear.
Yeah.
She was like, I don't want to marry you. And he's like, oh, don't worry, your life won't be over, but we can get married and have a kid, and you're probably going to be a stay-at-home mom, and like we'll figure it out, but your life won't be over. You can still do things.
Yeah, it's like when you come home, you can cook me dinner.
So let me ask you this one, buddy. You think they're done after this point?
Well, yeah.
And
one would hope.
They're not going to get married is what you're saying?
I'm going to say no. I'm pretty sure Jess really put her foot down here.
Okay, so I'm going to take a different approach.
Oh, I can't wait.
I'm going to say that they do get married. I'm going to say they get married rather soon because we all know that Billy is going to take out every single person in this house and in this movie, and it's going to be a very vacant house. But he's going to want to hang out in the attic like he's been doing this whole movie because he's kind of like an attic crawler and he's going to stay there. So you have to ask yourself one thing. Who's going to mow the lawn? Peter no longer is at the conservatory. We don't know what kind of major she has, but it's probably a stupid major. You can only assume. Did she say what she was going to do?
She did not.
She did, but we didn't care to listen.
That's fair.
So I'm going on the assumption it's a stupid major, and she has no career ahead of herself. She'll probably do some traveling. She has these ambitions. But ultimately, they're going to get married, and Pete's going to start a landscaping business with her. And they're going to mow their lawn. It's going to pay them in blood.
Yeah, that's a little much. It's way too much.
We can assume that if they got married, every time Jess did something and he wasn't into it, that he probably beat her at that point.
I think it's going to work. They can mow the lawn. Pete can take the bodies up and pay them in spare change.
Keep dreaming, Bryan.
I'm going to ask you now, better couple, Pete and Jess or Danny and Christian?
Ooh. Pete and Jess. Christian scum.
I mean, Pete's probably will be beating Jess at that point, so I don't know.
Do you really think that he would? I didn't actually get that impression, to be honest.
I mean, he's giving her light threats.
I mean, to be fair, he's probably murdering the girls in the attic.
But in all honesty, though, that's like that conversation where like that's a tough conversation to have because like he's a father of a child that he's gonna lose. So I can actually kind of see his point.
I'm sort of, but he's like, why don't you think of anyone but yourself? As if like she's shouldn't think of herself at this point where she's about to do something. But I get it. Like, at what point does someone cross the line? I mean, he's being psychologically abusive at this point anyway.
Yes, I mean, and we obviously, there's more to go on his character.
100%.
But another thing I would say is we don't really get too much information on what the relationship was prior to this recital that he was working on. Because obviously he was a psychopath during this whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't think she took him seriously. Like, he was really just meant to be a college boyfriend. And that's all he wanted to be. Like, she flat out tells him she doesn't want to marry him.
Yeah.
So she had no intentions of being with him after college anyway.
She actually just answered him right there. She's like, no, we're kind of.
Which is why, that was why my answer to you was a flat no.
She's told him to leave the house. He's lightly threatening her to not get an abortion. But yeah, they're all coming home from the police station from the search party with the detective and the guy who's going to tap their phone. And they see Peter angrily leaving.
Yes. He doesn't look at any of them, but Lieutenant Fuller thinks he's odd. He's like an odd pass by.
So this is where Detective Fuller gets his first hunch of the movie.
Yes. And in the 70s, a hunch is as strong as hard evidence is today.
Exactly. You can't beat a hunch. Even today, I feel like maybe sometimes the hunch outweighs the DNA.
But he's paying attention. That's the good thing about this detective. He's paying attention. So he has a hunch, but only because he's looking at his surroundings and he's putting things together.
I just want to say the greatest detective of all time, Sherlock Holmes, made a living off those hunches.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, that's true. So they're in the house, and they're in the house for one reason, and that is to wiretap these phones so that they can trace where the call is coming from.
Yep. And Graham goes immediately into tapping these phones. That's what he said to do. And that's what he's doing. We're going to go to Claire's room now, where Fuller, he's asking Jess when was the last time they saw Claire, or when anybody saw Claire. And she's like, well, I saw her last night at 10:30. And then he's got some more questions. He asks her about her living habits, about her boyfriend. And I think that he actually is clever. He tries to trick her because he immediately says, so you were the last person to see her this morning. And Jess is smart. She's like, no, I saw her last night at 10:30. He tried to cop her.
Yeah, because last time they saw her was at the party and she went up to pack and then no one's seen her since.
Cop's gonna cop. The one thing they do tell the girls, though, is to make sure to keep the person on the phone line for a long time. This way they can trace the call. Because if there's one thing we learn in this movie, is that tracing calls was extremely difficult in the 70s.
It took a really long time. You had to keep them on the phone for a really long time to connect everything.
And I'm just going to preface this by saying Jess is the worst person on the planet for this job because her conversations start and end with, hello? Hello?
As the police are now leaving, we see Pete was hiding behind a tree this entire time.
Yeah, like, it's true. This guy is kind of a creep. But I also think he'd make a great landscaper.
But don't we also get, like, a visual of the killer in the attic after that?
Yes, like almost directly, because now we cut back inside. Glasses is crying while hugging Jess, and then Glasses is going upstairs to go to sleep, but we now see the shot of the killer rocking Claire in the chair upstairs. And this is the first time I'm like, oh shit, maybe it isn't Peter, because how is Peter outside? How is Peter upstairs rocking the chair?
And, you know, through all these conversations, you hear like these words and like you hear Agnes and you're like, I'm putting these things together. He's constantly rocking this. It's almost like he's rocking a little girl. Like Claire is like a little girl.
Yeah, almost like his unborn baby.
Ah, linking it to Peter. You think it's Peter?
For most of the movie, I really did think it was Peter.
Until this very scene made me
Exactly
question that too. He looks good like playing Billy and being the killer in this movie. But until you get contradicting things, like we know Peter's outside and we know the killer's still in the house, it's like, oh,
it can't.
Maybe it's not. Because I did text you at this point in the movie, right before that scene, and I was like, is the killer someone we've already met?
Yeah.
And you were like, no.
That's what they do so cool with this movie. They really pose it like it's Peter. And up to this point right here is like the contradicting point where you're like, well, now it's going to be tough. Because unless there's like some kind of weird timeline shift that's not really totally clear to the viewer,
it can't be him.
It really can't be Peter.
Now, Jess thinks she hears something upstairs, and she goes upstairs and she sees that Barb is like gasping for air in her bed.
Yeah, she's like struggling to breathe. So she busts in the room and Barb is kind of like pointing to the inhaler, and Jess gives her the inhaler. It kind of calms her down. And Barb's like, I had a nightmare that someone was actually coming into my room, and someone is actually watching this.
Yes. Someone is looking through a glass unicorn and just like staring at them.
At this point, Jess hears carolers outside. She opens the door and she listens to them caroling. Do we remember what song they were caroling?
We thought it was "O Come All Ye Faithful," but it wasn't. It was the other one.
What's that one called?
A Little Town of Bethlehem?
Yes,
yeah,
A Little Town of
That
Bethlehem.
sounds correct.
So now the killer's walking through the house. He walks into Barb's room. And he's like, Agnes, it's me, Billy. It's all right. He reaches for a glass horse on the night table. He lifts it over his head like Cropsy in The Burning, right over his head, his face covered in darkness. You can't really see what he looks like. He's like, don't tell what we did, Agnes. And then he stabs her repeatedly with the glass. It's a unicorn?
Yeah, it's a unicorn.
Did I say unicorn before?
I did. You said horse, but it's okay. A horse is a unicorn with a horn, so it's all the same.
And now he repeatedly stabs her with this glass unicorn.
Yes. Now, the interesting thing is Jess is listening to the caroling as Barb is being brutally murdered upstairs. And I think Barb is screaming.
She is.
So the carolers have to be very loud.
And they're also from different directions because that's behind her.
Yeah.
And this is in front of her. But I actually would say, I'm not going to give this a please explain to me because she's fully enjoying the Christmas spirit here.
Yes. Because once you're enwrapped in Christmas, it's hard to hear anything else.
I wouldn't hear anybody screaming if people are going to be singing to me, especially the voices of such sweet angels like these carolers.
Could you imagine like hearing Barb scream from being murdered and all the kids just look up simultaneously like, what?
They just switch songs.
Like, oh, Screamo track. Got it.
They switched to, what was the last movie we watched where it was a movie that we're going to be doing like in a couple months because we record so far ahead of time, but the song goes,
Oh,
like that.
Us.
And they
Us,
all,
yeah.
and they all just like look up to that music and just see like Barb getting murdered in the window. That would have been a cool rewrite.
Yeah.
That would have been really funny, but it would have given away a lot of this movie.
So now the phone rings again.
Correct.
Jess goes back. She answers the phone. What does she say, Shane? What does she say? Hello? Hello? And Fuller now also picks it up because the tapped phone is going to be also answered at the police station. And Graham, who is the guy who tapped the phone, is going to be looking at the telephone station through what I can only assume is millions of lines this guy has to look through to find the source of this call.
I don't know how he would do. Is he like I imagine him seeing like a little line and starts like following it and running, and I don't know how he does that.
You see, that's what I took it as, is they have the phone tapped so they know where the starting point is, and he has to like follow maybe like a light that's like leading him to there. It's basically like you're in these hundreds of rows of like computer terminals almost, and he's just trying to find the one to pull out.
So I have a theory here. This is not a rewrite. This is a theory.
Okay.
That he's actually an ethereal spirit. I actually think he's in hell. This is the worst job a human being could have. I have no idea how he can do it. I feel bad for this guy.
They hung up too soon and they were not able to trace this call.
No. Fuller does call her though.
Yeah.
I imagine that call was like one of their longer calls though. So imagine that, like, it's a long time to trace this call. It's probably more than a minute.
Yeah, it has to be. So when Ken calls her, Detective Fuller, as you said, he starts asking Jess about Peter. Like, he wants information. But before we can get into that information, a side comedy act has to happen. There's this huge commotion in the police station, and a cop runs in who has been shot in the ass for trespassing on some guy's property. And the guy's like, he was on my property. I had to shoot him with a buckshot.
Texas tough.
Yeah.
But what I'd also like to say is, this is really irrelevant to the movie, but this is just like police station antics, right? Like,
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's anything to do with the plot.
No, it's just like horror movies, I guess, as long as time, have always had those just little side moments of comedy. To
Yeah.
levy, and that's just
Distraction.
what this is. Exactly.
Yeah, it's a distraction. But don't we get a call between Jess and Peter before he starts asking her more about Peter?
Hello?
That comes up right now, actually.
Yeah. And he begs her again, please do not kill the baby. Like, really rethink what you're going to do. And the call was not long enough. It could not be traced. And then Fuller calls again, right? He's asking about that call.
And she's like, you can hear that? And it's like, no shit, Sherlock, your phones are tapped. He's not selective on his calls. Like, like, what kind of stupid question was that, though?
So now the search party appears at the window, right? And I think Phil is like startled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yes.
because they're standing there with like, what, a shovel and a gun or something?
Well, yeah, because she went to the kitchen by herself to get some aspirin, and these two guys with shotguns just appear at her door.
And isn't this so cool though? Because like, don't you guys want to be part of like a witch hunt or like one of these things?
No.
That's just me?
A witch hunt?
Witch hunt,
Which one is not the word to use?
search party,
There you
This
go.
is why
angry mob.
This is why Bryan isn't a part of search parties. Because he's like, all right, let's start the witch hunt. And he comes out with like a torch and a stake. And everyone's like, Bryan, we're searching for like a missing person. And he's like, I thought this was a witch hunt.
Yeah, we're not searching for Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Wrong mob. Let me go to Transylvania. Start hanging with those guys in Romania.
Oh my God. What is this, the Howling 2?
He can join that town in Silent Hill. I'm sure they'll be happy to have him.
Yes.
Founded by witch hunters.
So like the search party, they're just asking if they've seen anything out of the ordinary. And, after they leave, they're kind of like laughing at them. They're like, they'd rather speak to the killer than these creepy people who, like I mentioned before, I'd love to be a part of.
Yes. So then we cut back to Detective Fuller, and he wants all the records on Peter. Like he's in on this Peter theory now.
And why is that, Shane?
Because he seems like he is the killer. To be fair, we have now seen shots that contradict that, but still to Fuller, it would look like Peter is the number one suspect.
But I just want to specify a hunch.
Right now, Peter has a motive why he'd be upset, and he seems pretty erratic. Like we've seen his killer kind of escalate from just being angry and upset to destroying the school's piano and then making threats to Jess. So it's kind of not as extreme as like the phone calls were, but it's kind of on the same wavelength. And of course, like we haven't discovered the big secret behind the calls yet, but Peter has been in the house. And because they're tracing the calls, she's like, Peter can't be the killer. And then she's like, oh, he was in the house when they were calling. Like it couldn't have been him. Thank God. Like, so she really thinks it's not Peter, but there's contradictory evidence to support that it could have been Peter.
Yes.
So now Phil's going to walk into Barb's room and the door is going to lock behind her. The phone will ring in the house again. Jess answers it. She has to keep the killer on the line. She says, hello? Hello? And the killer's like, you pig, you fat pig. And then you hear like a woman's voice because you hear different voices coming from this line. And the voice is like screaming for Billy. You left Billy alone with Agnes. Where's the baby? And it's like at this point, I'm starting to realize this guy really missed an opportunity in telemarketing. Because could you imagine this guy just like selling like a whole line of cosmetics? I think he'd do a bang up job. I would listen to that for longer than someone trying to sell me on like car insurance or hair transplants or something.
That just makes me think of, you remember in Scary Movie 1 where the hot girls with like their tits out get a phone call and it's like the really creepy voice that's supposed to be like, you'll die in 7 days. And then she's like, oh, hi, Mom. She's like, how are you?
Exactly. So Graham is still looking in the telephone station anywhere he could find the source of this call. And Fuller's told that the killer called. He heads back to the car to listen. The voice continues. He's like, give mommy the baby. The baby's all right. And I'm actually trying to give as much detail as possible, only because this backstory is the only information you have on the killer.
Yeah. You learn nothing about this guy, except, like you said, what you get through these phone calls. After this phone call, though, this is where Detective Fuller goes to the conservatory, as we've been calling it, and he sees that Peter has completely smashed this piano.
Oh, yeah.
So now he sees the anger that Peter has.
Now he thinks that Peter's in like a fit of rage.
Exactly. So the police, though, have now finally traced this call that Jess had received. They learned that the calls are coming from inside the house, which we think we are putting our foot down that this is the first time the calls have come from inside the house. The first movie to do it.
We referenced it earlier, and it's tough to say. There's so many old movies that might have explored it, but this is definitely the earliest one that I've seen.
Yeah, that's why we're saying
this one was the one that inspired like all the ones you think of after.
Gotcha.
Perfect.
What were the ones you guys named?
I said Scream, and I believe When a Stranger Calls.
Yes, I did see that this movie was direct inspiration for those.
Gotcha.
So Detective Fuller, though, is going to make his only mistake of the movie. Well, first he's going to get to the house and he's going to see that Jennings has his neck cut, right? They show that first.
Jennings is the guy that's protecting them outside in the cop car and his neck is slit.
Yes. So now Detective Fuller will make his only mistake. He's going to call Nash and he's going to entrust Nash with the job of telling Jess to put down the phone and leave the house and not to go upstairs. And his specific instructions are do not tell Jess that the killer is inside the house.
I thought we don't see that the cop outside had his neck cut till the cops get there later.
No, I think it happens.
They do it. They show a flash.
Oh,
like
okay.
no one has discovered it, but they show the viewer that the cop is dead.
Fuller, to even expand on what you said, Shane, he goes, if you blow this, I will kill you.
I guess that wasn't a good enough threat.
It wasn't. So I'll let Bryan explain how Nash handles this.
And he handles this with such eloquence and such grace. The phone's going to ring and Jess is going to do her famous, hello, hello. And he says, do not ask any questions. Just do exactly as I say, Jess. Put the phone on the hook, walk to the front door, and leave the house, right? That's exactly what Fuller wanted him to say.
Yes.
And he executed it to perfection. However, Jess is like, Phil and Barb are still in the house. And they're upstairs. And Nash is like, do not go upstairs, Jess. Do not do that. The call is coming from in the house. The killer is in your house. And she immediately looks up the stairs, puts the phone down, and now that she no longer has the phone, he's like, don't go up there. Don't go up there. She's going up
she
there.
directly like doesn't like she could have honestly listened and walked out. And like I get you're worried about your friends, but the police are like, walk out of the house, they'll be there soon.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I don't know what I would do in her situation.
I'd probably just walk out.
See, I don't know if I would.
It
Like,
depends how close the friends are.
Yeah, because if your two friends are upstairs and you know the killer's up there and you don't know they're dead already and you just think they're sleeping, like it's hard to leave them behind.
I have the self-proclaimed moniker of total bro that would do anything for my boys. Honestly, it just depends on said boy. I'm just being fair.
It's also like a thought that there's obviously multiple phones in the house. So you have no idea if the killer's also picked up a line and is listening to what they're saying.
Also a good point. Yeah, it's tough. But Jess does I guess you would consider it the noble thing, and she goes upstairs to check on them.
With the fireplace poker.
Yeah, so at least she is smart where she does get herself a weapon, and a good weapon. A fireplace poker is a good weapon.
And Jess is your average girl, right? So she's not like a tomboy, or she's not like she might be an athletic type, but she doesn't seem that way. So like probably hitting somebody with a fireplace poker is not commonplace for her. I would just make the assumption.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with that. I don't think she's going around smacking Peter with a fireplace poker.
Maybe she should.
Well, she's going to.
Hopefully.
So she walks into Barb's room. It's locked. And then I guess I was wrong about what I said because she breaks down the door.
Good point. And inside of this room is Barb and Glasses, just dead and posed like on the bed. And behind her on the side, you just see the eye of the killer.
Yeah, you know what it reminds me of? Do you know like the cover art for Criminal Origins Condemned? Did you see the eye?
The eye through the door hole?
Yeah.
Video game reference for those out there.
And the killer he actually like verbally talks to a character for the first time in the movie because he says, "It's me, Agnes. Don't tell what we did." And he keeps saying this. It's interesting because I wonder if he's like using this Agnes as like every girl that he kills, almost like he puts Agnes into.
Yeah, like he's projecting onto them.
Yeah. So she slams the door right on his face and he's screaming in agony because that must hurt.
Yeah. And she runs right for the front door, but it's locked. I'm assuming she's just like struggling to get the locks done and she just wants to get out of there. So she does the wise thing and runs into the room that no one can ever get out of, the basement.
Yeah, and she locks herself in there. He tries to break down the door, but he cannot. And then she sees the shadow of somebody outside the basement window. This person then literally breaks the glass pane of the window and comes in. And it's our good friend, Pete.
He's searching the basement and he's calling for Jess. He's like, Jess, are you down here? And he sees her hiding like in the corner. He slowly is approaching her.
And he's like, his tone is kind of like soft and creepy.
Yeah.
He's like, what was all that yelling about, Jess? You had me so worried. And you're like, maybe he is the killer.
Yeah, he's just like super creepy in this scene for no reason.
And then like as the viewer, you're like, wait, you can't be the killer, but like how can you not be now? Like it's you.
Yeah.
He's not that per se killer, but he looks like he's about to kill her. So
maybe he is a killer.
Yeah. And then out of nowhere, Claude the cat comes out and kills both of them.
That's a flex.
It's a rewrite.
I like it.
So Claude the cat comes in, kills both of them, but he props the bodies to make it look like Pete killed Jess and then killed himself. So when the police come in, they think it was a murder-suicide, and Claude the cat gets away and vacations in Cabo.
He just finds another family and goes to their house, and it starts all over again.
That's what cats do. They're secret murderers, and they latch onto new families.
I guess.
But that's not what actually happened.
No, because then what's going to happen is Fuller arrives with the rest of the police reinforcements. I think this is where Fuller actually confirms that Jennings is dead in the car. He hears screaming from the house, so he runs in. Fuller breaks down the basement door, and he sees Peter just full of blood all over his face on Jess's lap. But Jess is alive. She's shown getting sleep now. She's like in this room with like all these cops, and Fuller is kind of talking about what happened with some of the other policemen.
Yeah, they mentioned discovering some of the other bodies. Obviously, they found Barb's body. They found Glass's body. So at this point, though, the police have still not found Claire or Mrs. Mack.
They don't actually make that clear.
They don't themselves, but what we'll see soon, you could obviously assume they haven't.
They haven't, actually.
Yeah. I actually was surprised. You assume that they scaped the whole house, and they just said, we have a lot of bodies coming in tonight. Yeah, there's a shit ton of bodies in that house. They don't make it clear they haven't found those two bodies.
Yeah, so this movie is, like I said, it's close to being a perfect slasher up until the end. Now they do things right with the ending, but they do things that are so questionable, it kind of hurts the ending.
Yeah, I'm with you. I love everything they did, in all honesty, but there's a couple of misses here, and there's some like, that cops would have done this.
Yeah. So the one thing is now Jess is just laying in her own bed
in the house.
And you would think they would bring her to a hospital for one of two reasons. One, just the traumatic moment of seeing her dead friends and having to fend off Peter. Yeah. And two, just like she obviously fought Peter. I'm sure she has some injuries or something that like you would bring her to a hospital for.
Yeah.
So I don't know the advancements of the forensics and DNA at this point, but this is what they're chalking it up to. Peter's the killer from the circumstantial evidence that they drew. And most importantly, like I said earlier, the hunch.
Yeah.
And it seems that he attacked Jess at the end.
Yeah.
There's breaking and entering because he broke in through the basement. Because they even referenced it. Like, it's hard to believe that Jess, such a sweet girl, would kill Peter, but that's what they're drawing from that conclusion.
And that's fair. I don't mind that they think it's Peter. I just think like after all this girl's been through, you would bring her to the hospital for a night.
Especially because, like you said, she just like seemingly fought off Peter. He was also seemingly in a violent rage because he just smashed that whole piano and he broke into their house. So assuming he went there to harm her, why not bring her to a hospital? Could have tried to choke her or something or hit her or anything.
But they don't do any of that because they all leave.
Like,
they do leave one cop there with her. As she is now alone in her bed. The cop goes outside to smoke a cigarette, I believe.
She's super drugged.
Yes. But then it pans into the attic and you still see Mrs. Mack and you see Claire. So they have never found these two bodies. And that is my second thing. It's like, how would the cops not search the attic?
This is a huge, please explain to me, like a huge one, because it's not even like the attic's like this obscure part of the house. It's like down the hall and you could clearly see it up there.
Yeah. And Claire's missing. I get like they're not looking for Mrs. Mack. They think she went to her sister's. But if you're still missing Claire, you would search that entire house, especially if you think Pete has now killed Phyllis and Barb.
Especially if they had the decency to go to the basement where Jess and Pete were just like down there and he's laying on a lap. I actually thought that she was dead in that scene.
At first I did too.
Yeah, but they like went down and seemingly searched the entire basement. Why wouldn't you then do the opposite and search the attic?
They don't. I don't know. But the movie does have a cool ending here where then they just kind of pan back to the first shot of the movie where you just see like the house all lit up and you just hear the phone ringing.
So the phone actually rings 13 times.
Jess is not able to say hello because she is drugged up in her bed.
Very sedated.
So presumably she does get killed at the end of the movie by Billy.
Safe to say.
Yeah. And that is Black Christmas 74.
I do have a question though.
Yeah.
It is the end of the movie. Just some theories out there. Do you think Jess actually killed her or do you think Billy killed him and left her alive?
I think Jess killed Pete.
Yeah.
Like, why is she like unconscious though?
That's why I'm assuming they fought.
Oh, and like there's something happened and like she got knocked out, but she was able to kill him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then she's just like passed out from exhaustion.
I could agree with that because I think he like likes the whole setup he's got going with like Claire up there as like his perma Agnes, even though he's shooting everybody as Agnes.
Yeah, that's why I think it was just the scuffle between her
and maybe
Pete.
Mrs. Mack is like his mother.
If the police got there pretty soon during that fight, Billy probably would have hid in the attic until everyone left. Because he never starts doing anything when there's multiple people in the house. He always waited until it was just one or two of them.
He singles them off.
Exactly.
Yeah, we were so close to the landscaper thing too. If only Peter made it through.
That's a real shame, isn't it? This movie, I'm just going to go right into my review.
Yeah, let's see what you got, Shane.
Okay. I love it. It is a great slasher film. It is one of the best slasher films. I don't like it as much as, say, Halloween or like Texas Chainsaw, as we always say, but it's right there, right below them. It's shot well with the POVs. I think you said it, one of the two of you said it earlier. The fact that they had the actual cameraman doing the POVs as the killer was a great idea because he knows how to film a shot like that. He's a cameraman. The acting is all good in the movie. I have no complaints with that. I love that you don't know anything about the killer other than the phone calls. You never even see his face in the movie. Once it's known that it's not Peter, you know it was someone else, but you don't ever see who that was. And I really like that about this movie. If it wasn't for those little things at the end that take away from it, I probably could have gave this movie a 9, but I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
Okay, I'll go next. I love this movie. I'm not going to be shy about it. We've been talking about it, so I'm just going to say Texas Chainsaw is definitely my favorite slasher of all time.
I got to rewatch it. I can't even like say for sure because I have this weird thing where I remember distinct parts of movies. Like for instance, high spoiler alert, Candyman. I only remember the part where he sticks a hook up a girl's vagina and splits her in two. I only take away very specific parts, so I can't even compare it to like other slashers because it's been too long.
Yeah, and you know, I don't want to discount the slasher genre in general because I always put like these pivotal old school movies, but there's a ton of good slasher movies in the 2000s. You would consider Wrong Turn a slasher? I would. Like there's
100% Wrong Turns a slasher.
Hills Have Eyes, like not the original. I think the remake's actually better, but
It is.
There's a lot of good slasher movies, but just for me and a little bit of the background history, like the way they experiment with the whole backwoods family iteration of cannibalism is awesome. But the way they shot this movie is brilliant. And just from the, like you said, the point of view shots of the killer, you don't really get too much background, so you really don't know. And you have to draw your own conclusions through this movie. All of his shots are purposely intended. Like he looks up at the window and he goes up that window. Like, even though he's like kind of like schizophrenic, he is a pretty calculated guy in the way he kills. The kills are very good in this movie. You have to draw your own interpretation of his backstory through the limited phone conversations he has. Even though there's a lot of phone calls, it's a lot of jumbled talk, multiple things. Like he talks about his dad briefly, his mom, and you get the idea that he had like this weird relationship with his sister, Agnes. You don't know what his intentions are. And I love the way that you have to actually create this killer yourself. 9 out of 10 for me. Probably my second favorite slasher to this point. There's still a lot for me to explore. I think I mentioned it earlier. I'm not the biggest slasher fan because I know there's so much duplication in the genre, but the ones that stand out really stand out. So this is special for me. Pioneered the genre. 9 out of 10.
I don't remember what I gave this. What did I give this yesterday?
Think an 8.
Either an 8 or a 9.
I think I give it an 8 because the ending didn't make sense for me compared to like that they seemingly were doing decent and good police work afterwards and that they seemingly should bring her to a hospital. There's like no reason they shouldn't have done that. That was like actually like kind of a weird thing, but it was just done for the movie because we needed the phone ring at the very end of this movie. So I give it an 8. I'd watch this every Christmas. It's thoroughly enjoyable. And the rest of the movie, like it's not too gory. It's not over the top scary. I think they balance everything super well and all the little nuances like giving Billy backstory through his phone calls that you kind of have to pay attention to, but that was purposefully put in after they gave the murderer in this movie a little bit of backstory. It was just really cool. It's really enjoyable. And I don't mind the Jaws approach. I thoroughly like the Jaws approach because I think it's scarier. Because when a robber breaks into your house, you don't know what it looks like. You don't know what he's there for. Makes it scarier. I really enjoyed this movie. So solid 8. And now comes the time. Who, gentlemen, are we adding to our Necronomicon this week?
We have a couple of good options because for 74, the kills are really good.
Could probably just tell you who we argued about yesterday.
That's what I was going to do.
We already talked about it,
yes.
But we have our choice. But we'll tell you who we thought were good options for this.
So the 3, we actually, for the first time, all had a different person. I had said Barb, Bryan had said Claire, and Jen had said Mrs. Mack. And then we had taken Claire out of the equation, and we did the only fair way possible. We did a coin flip. And Mrs. Mack is who we have presented to be in our Necronomicon.
Yeah, I think I presented Claire because she's the one that kind of kicked off the movie with the she's like, I guess the one that you would consider like his first victim is like almost like his Agnes, but we're still kind of like defining what we're putting into the book, whether it's, you know, the worst, most severe kill. Is it the most pivotal character? Is it the most serious moment? Is it a moment that's actually like hinges the story?
Yeah, I think we're like kind of just doing a combo of everything at this point.
It is a combo of everything, but we are taking majority ruling.
Yes.
And since this one was kind of like, we all had different opinions, I offered to revoke Claire from the book.
I think they're all good options. Like, we're not going to just put someone in out of like random people who, unless like we just really enjoy them, like they're really funny, if like for whatever reason we really enjoy them in the movie. I think like our standards for it has to be someone who either had a great kill, really contributed to the story, or was just like a favorite character of our, like it can't just be like someone random. So I think Mrs. Mack was a great choice, but I think we can give Barb an honorable mention, even though Mrs. Mack was the OG house mom alcoholic. Yeah. I feel like she taught Barb a lot. Shane, do you have a eulogy prepared as we pour out some of our Trulies for Mrs. Mack?
Yes, Mrs. Mack, you were a great house mother. You taught Barb everything she knew about alcohol. You were the best at hiding alcohol. You were the queen of hide and seek. And for that, we put you in our Necronomicon.
She's in it, boys and girl.
So that is our first review of the holiday season, Black Christmas 74. And now we can reveal that next week we are doing another great holiday film, Black Christmas 2006.
Oh, that's the one that's starring Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Michelle Trachtenberg, other hot sorority chicks.
Yep.
I'll save my opinion for the movie.
Yep.
I can't wait, personally. So, with that said, we are the final podcast signing off, and we will see you next week at the Yellow Boys house. So if you haven't already, please follow us on Facebook and Twitter at The Final Pod Ever. Follow us on Instagram at The Final Podcast. And if you haven't, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple. It really, really helps Apple, push out our content and recommend us to other people to listen to.
Okay, I gotta record one thing and I'm gonna put it at the end of the podcast for this episode. Just stand right there, Shane.
Like, what are you doing?
To get upside down and record like Billy.
Don't actually do
I need
that.
to get upside down and record.
Yeah, don't
like...
do that. That seems very dangerous in this room with a lot of sharp objects.
Maybe like this though. Maybe like this.
Okay, this is dangerous.
This is not upside down.
Yeah, this is a terrible idea.
Are we getting somewhere?
No, we're getting nowhere. This is where we're getting.
Eating my ass.
You gotta get upside down more. Like you gotta turn around.
Oh, I'm trying to do the 180. I need to get like this.
Yeah, it's not gonna work.
Oh, we're getting somewhere.
This is a bad idea. This is a terrible idea. I hate everything that's happening. Okay.
Oh.
All right.
Let me look a pretty big muscle.
You're just forward in a bad position.
You're not even upside down.
I think I tore my shoulder too.
Yeah.
You good?
Yeah, that was different. It's definitely different.
Yes, continue with that energy.
The fuck was that? Like an 18-wheeler?